8B, discuss and consider action to award a contract for emergency medical services in the city and authorize the city manager to execute the same.
We agreed to pursue a 3-month contract with ESD2 for EMS at a cost of $50,000 per month.
Mr. Ruiz.
Yes.
Ms. Holliday. Mr. Metayer.
No.
Mr. McDonald.
No.
And Mr. Rogers.
No.
And Mayor votes no. Motion failed.
I've also prepared a contract with Allegiance.
Mr. Ruiz.
Yes.
Ms. Holliday.
Yes.
Mr. Metayer.
I feel much more comfortable if it's a public entity as private, so I'm going to have to say no.
Okay. And Mr. McDonald.
I feel that going with the private entity affords us this path to a municipal entity, so yes.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Okay. And Mayor will side with Mr. Metayer. I vote no. Motion carried.
I got lots of questions. I've developed a reservation. I went back and reviewed the video of the meeting that we had, the joint meeting with the ESD2 folks. And I have to express my concern over the unwillingness of the board to work with us towards a transition plan.
What's your vision for 20 years from now? Is the ESD in perpetuity the appropriate solution based on your expertise in your roles, or is it something where we work collaboratively together?
We have not, thought that far 20 years down the road.
I think we have an answer for the next 5 weeks. I'm not sure I have an answer for the next 5 years. The department's well-funded. We're moving forward. We're able to get the things done we need to get done and build on the ambulance service. I mean, a lot's evolved. So,
I mean, if you're able to do that, why are you asking me for a subsidy?
we're not asking for a subsidy. We're asking for a payment for the cost of service.
Can we have that conversation? Can y'all have that conversation tonight with us here?
I don't think we're prepared. At least I'm not prepared to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'll be clear. I'm open to it long-term in July. I'm not open to that.
I think that's your answer, Mr. Weiss.
It's a linear decision that I'm not prepared to make tonight.
And I think it's just a verbal, yes, we'd love to work with you on this long term.
Making commitments tonight on something so big that's such a tight knot of services and costs and expensive and methodologies, that's a bridge too far tonight.
I don't think they're agreeable to that down payment
No,
with
I
a
don't-
vision
yeah.
into the future,
Well,
because they're not, no,
yeah.
I'm saying you guys want to have a conversation in July, but for us to say that's a down payment tonight, I don't think it's going to work. They're here to,
Provide service until that time so that we can get through the planning sessions and get to a long-term agreement.
Emergency services are going regional, not municipal. I can't support your idea of, at least from my position, saying we're not going to have a decision, we're just going to wait. So,
I don't see the transition of the entire fire department over to the city of Pflugerville.
Shall I assume that the answer is no?
yeah, I can't support
I'm sorry, free of charge? No. I'm one of five.
and I'm another one of five.
yeah.
If I felt like we couldn't come to a long-term solution, I'd be, throwing up a brick wall and saying, well, thank y'all for being here, but obviously we're at an impasse.
I cannot, as a good city manager, go back to the public and say, I can support the cost.
We're in agreement that we are going to work together in a joint solution down the road.
My issue with that is I'm not sure how you're defining
Yeah.
emergency.
We will define
I
that.
don't see it as a burden, and I can't support that as an
If,
issue.
you-
I think-
if it's not a burden, pay for it.
If you put,
I'm just unwilling to make that commitment tonight because it's too much intellectual thinking, too much facts, too many personalities, too much politics to take on.
Who's a third party?
right.
And I'm curious if mention or discussion of a transition plan came up in our contract negotiations, discussion with either ESD2 or with Allegiance.
Go ahead.
Well, with the ESD2, prior, when we were looking for, when we interviewed them all, I asked all of them about that. So yes, with the Allegiance, they were more than happy to work on a transition plan with us. ESD2, the conversation was a little bit more in depth as far as that was a discussion that we would need to make with the ESD2 board. And so at that time, no commitment could be made to us. We certainly brought this up to the ESD2 board in the past. It just didn't, the conversation didn't go as easily with them as it was for everyone else. Transition doesn't seem to be a long-term goal for them as it is for us, but things do change.
Well, and going back, and again, we were caught up in our joint meeting in terms of trying to reach a point of convergence between our two bodies. And when I went back and looked at our meeting a second time, I didn't see that, I want to say, even willingness to go down that road. There was some very adamant denials of transfer, and I don't know if, I hear Councilwoman Holliday.
I want to echo you, that was the case, which is why I was a no.
Right.
We made a motion based on your recommendation. After all of that took place, that was the case. There was not very much a willingness to want to work in a long-term partnership.
And I have to say that although we haven't taken a vote on consensus in terms of or at least I don't think we've had a vote of consensus in terms of creating our own municipal service, but it seems like that's been our intent formulating through a lot of these conversations. Simply because, and again, I go back to that video, when you rewatch it, when the question of funding came up, and a year ago, we talked about, or ESD2 talked about, and I was sitting out in the audience, ESD2 talked about they were going to be insolvent, that the funding models that they had derived and presented showed that they could not sustain EMS service, and that was why they were looking at ESD17 to help support that, and how they were looking to the city to help supplement that. And then a year later, on our last meeting with them, that narrative, in my mind, completely changed. It changed from, well, they had and city manager can give me the specific numbers if we need them, but they had a surplus in their expenses. They didn't spend as much money as they thought, and in their specifically in their sales tax, and I think maybe even their ad valorem revenue capture, they had an increase, and so they had fewer expenses and they had increased revenue, and so they had a surplus for the year that was revealed in the audit. But there was no willingness to say, oh, that surplus is more than enough to pay for EMS service. They sound like they were specifically saying EMS isn't something that we're obligated to fund. And then they tried to, as I remember, bring an argument of equity, saying, well, ESD 17 is paying, Travis County's paying, so the city should pay. And to me, that's not a question of equity at all. Equity is completely different from everyone pays the same. Equity is a completely different proposition. And so I'm concerned. I'm gravely concerned about, do we go into and I'm the one who suggested it, right? I'm the one I take full responsibility for that. Do we go into a 3-month discussion of what our long-term goal is with a partner who's established at the outset, they don't have a long-term transitory goal with us? Or do we just look at it right now in terms of that $150,000 that we would be spending over the next 3 months, or whatever investment ESD2 is asking for, instead of investing that into ESD2, do we turn to look at that monetary investment into our future with a partner who's more willing to work with us in that transition?
Oh, let me just follow up, and I very much agree with your concerns, and I do think that the equity question is an important one, the financial equity question, and I think the fact that there's a lack of transparency with ESD2 is a problem in terms of assessing that. They say, well, if there's tax money in the ESD17 area, property tax money that they're levying, but they don't ever say how much money are we actually getting, and frankly, the value of the property in the city of Pflugerville, the commercial property and the residential property, is much higher than the property on Wells Branch, where they've got one CVS and a couple of gas stations and a barbecue joint. They've got nothing in that area to compare to the sales tax revenue that's generated out of Walmart alone, never mind Stone Hill. I think that the city of Pflugerville is likely over-subsidizing in terms of dollars per resident, dollars per ride, that kind of thing. But I'm concerned that the ESD has never provided us with that analysis. There's been a consistent pattern of lack of transparency in their finances. I think you pointed out at the last meeting, the $16 million delta between their projections and actuals, and then they're not correcting their forward budget based on their previous year's audit. I think all of those things give me real concern about the reliability of them as a financial partner. On top of that, going through these proposed contracts here, one of the things, and of course, we get mixed messages from the ESD, right? Because we've got the chief, we got the board members, we've got the association, we've got different messages coming from all of those, and each one of them can conveniently disavow the others. But we were told last year before last, minutes save lives. And now the new mantra is, well, we have a higher quality of service. Well, one of those is true, but either minutes matter or they don't. And when the ESD was coming to us saying, we're going to be out of money, they said, we can get you that service super fast. We know that the private provider that we've had for the last several months has had really rapid response times, in some cases averaging under 6 minutes. I'm looking at these proposed contracts, and Allegiance is committing to a response time for emergency calls within 7 minutes and 59 seconds, 90% of the time. And what we're being offered by ESD2 is a clock stopper that will arrive at 11 minutes and 59 seconds in the priority 1 calls, and 13 minutes and 59 seconds for priority 2 calls, and a transport that'll arrive priority 1, 13:59 and 15:59. I'm having a heart attack. I don't want to wait an extra 8 minutes. You know, I have elderly relatives that live in this town that might have a heart attack and need a rapid response. And I'd a lot rather be assured that they're going to get EMS service in 8 minutes than 16 minutes. I think that ESD2 is not going anywhere, and the city of Pflugerville is not going anywhere. ESD2 provides excellent fire response. But like you, I have some concerns about where they are with their financials and with their long-term commitment to helping us set up a EMS service for advanced life support in the city. Now, we're not legally obligated to do it either. Right? They said we're not obligated legally to provide advanced life support, and that's true. And the city is not legally obligated to do it either. But we are morally obligated to do it. And, you know, as the city, we're the backstop if the Emergency Services District won't do it. But the Emergency Services District came to the citizens of Pflugerville in 2014, and they said, we want to raise your sales taxes to pay for advanced life support. And the citizens of Pflugerville, by a margin of 6 votes, said, okay, you guys can have a half cent of our sales tax. And here we are, nearly a decade later, and they're saying, we've got plenty of money, and we're not going to give it to you. I have real reservations about entering into a partnership agreement with people who have treated the city of Pflugerville that way. And, you know, it's not their money, it's the taxpayers' money. And whether the taxpayers pay directly to ESD2 or they pay the city of Pflugerville and we pay ESD2, it's all coming out of the same pockets. But the question is, can we work with them in the long term to provide a long-term solution? You know, as Rudy is fond of saying, we're looking at a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year solution, you know, not a 90-day Band-Aid. And speaking of Band-Aid metaphors, I think it's time to rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I wanted to get back to Councilman McDonald, some of your concerns, I mean, I shared them during the meeting at the same time. And I'll admit, the reason I voted with one of the many reasons I voted along with your proposal was because I had those answers, but every time we would ask the questions, I mean, I didn't have those answers, I had those questions, but every time we asked those questions, it was always, well, we can't answer those questions right now because we have to wait until July to get together during their big summit or meet or whatever it is to be able to hammer out those questions. And so that's why I thought your proposal was a good compromise, because it gave them time and us time to meet with them to be able to hammer out those compromises it gives us those 3 months and see and asking them point blank, are you willing to do this? I also have concerns about their finances. I mean, in my world, and I could be wrong, but in my world, I could have swore I heard them tell Serena that the taxes went to fire, but yet they put fire and EMS together and they have no way of separating those. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's just my world. I could be wrong. You know, maybe I...
Serena, did they say that to you?
I think you're speaking about the joint meeting. I asked the question, it was in the joint meeting.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
just confirm.
Yes.
And so, I do have concerns as well. But again, the reason I voted along with your proposal was because it gave us those 3 months to be able to sit down with them one final time and hammer it out and say, hey, are you willing to have a discussion about a long-term agreement? If you're not, let's hear it now. If you are, let's put it down in writing right now, because we don't have time to continue playing around with these games any longer. And that's just my opinion.
And that's where reviewing that video, where I asked them point blank in that joint meeting. And going back and listening to the chorus of no's, some adamant. I don't see bouncing back from that. I mean, looking at it, and again, I take full responsibility for throwing out the sort of Band-Aid approach or the 3-month, let's see if we can work towards a solution compromise. As Councilmember Weiss would say if he were here, when you compromise, everyone loses. And my goal is for us to find the highest quality of service long-term for the citizens of Pflugerville without anyone having to lose.
Yeah, and he's probably going to text you in a minute and say, that's not how I said it, but.
I should paraphrase.
And I wouldn't say compromise.
No, I
And,
mean, if it's the wish of the majority of this council to go in another direction, but I'll support it so long as that direction involves a long-term solution that Councilman Metayer is always talking about.
Okay, and Mr. Metayer, we do have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the ESD2 3-month agreement or contract.
Thanks, Mayor. And this is the comment session?
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone said what they wanted to say?
By June 22nd.
Okay. So, call the question.
I'd like to offer an amendment. And the amendment,
You offer an amendment, you can't vote no.
yes, I can.
Don't offer the amendment.
Yeah,
Don't muddy the water.
All right, I'll offer it as a
Okay,
separate motion.
I have a call for the question here. Okay. Mr. Ruiz,
Yes.
Ms. Holliday, Mr. Metayer,
No.
Mr. McDonald,
No.
and Mr. Rogers,
No.
and Mayor votes no. Motion failed.
Serena, I think you have the other half of it.
Serena, the contract that you brought to us from Allegiance, how long is it, how long would it be in effect for?
2 years with option for 1-year renewals.
Mayor, will you accept the motion?
Yep.
Motion to approve the contract with Allegiance.
Second.
You have a motion and a second to approve the contract with Allegiance. Discussion?
I would feel more comfortable if we had some kind of, something in there that indicated we intend to have it's already in the contract for them to help us transition. But our intention is for long-term, I don't know, help me with this.
Caesar, let me offer my separate motion after we approve this one.
Let's get a clarification from the city manager to see if that clause is already in there. I thought I saw something.
I don't believe so, Dan. I don't remember specifics or Charlie to a long-term transition being spelled out.
That was never.
Not a long-term transition. I think that our goal is to eventually transition into our own. And I don't want just an open-ended thing where we're back here in a year and a half trying to renew a contract because we didn't do the work to, again, like, Councilman Metayer is always saying, I told y'all this, but we haven't officially sent I would say that working order out there that, hey, we need a direct city manager and staff to be working on a long-term solution.
And that's the reason why I voted against the ESD previous part. We've got to have a long-term solution. Whoever we're with has to partner with us and have the intent, long-term solution transition for us to do so, because we cannot burden another council with this issue. It is frustrating because we generally care. I know everyone on this council cares about our community, cares about the ESD, cares about those folks, everything else involved with it. But we also have to make responsible decisions for our taxpayers. And making a responsible decision for our taxpayers is making sure that never again any council, it would be let's just be blunt to the public. It would have been much easier for us to just have said, you know what, go ahead and have that election. Go ahead and go do all these things. Because you know what, from us, hey, why does that need sweat off our back? You know, that's not us. You're making the decision over here. But we knew what kind of economic issues we had. We saw the challenges we have. We saw the growth of the city and how we have to be responsible and how we're going to do that, because we know there's going to be other items and other things we're going to pay for. And luckily, because we're a city, we have other different tools in our tool sets to help buttress and make sure that whenever that transition happens, whenever we have that we can afford and shield yourself from some of those burdens that happen with that. And I agree. I think that, I just walked in and I felt like I just walked into the meeting from 2 weeks ago where everybody was just, they were frustrated saying, hey, why couldn't we just get a yes about, truly transitioning and working from that as well, from that. So I think whatever we have has to have that in there. It just does.
Can I
Charlie, would
offer-
it be better to vote on this one and then come back in the future with an agenda item to direct?
City
can I take
manager
that
has
one?
come.
Yes, ma'am,
So
please
if I'd
do.
offer a suggestion, I wouldn't put that contractually between us and a third-party provider. I'd put that between this council and me to make a plan for the future.
And I think you had indicated in the joint
Yes.
meeting that you'd already made some provisional forays to look for a qualified partner that could help formulate that strategy and build out that plan. And for us to determine, is that a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a million-year plan? We don't know.
Because I don't
but
think
find an
that's our,
expert.
I don't think that's our provider that makes that plan. I
Agreed.
believe that's a third party. So I wouldn't contractually obligate Allegiance to do so.
But we also had the conversation whenever 2 years ago now. My goodness. Our third-party advisor said whoever we work with, that's part of it, because they're the SMEs, and we
Agreed.
want them to be able to work with us. Whoever's providing those EMS services to help transition and work with us on that. So, that's where I've got. You're right.
gotcha.
It's ultimately up to you, but that's what we want to have that. So we're not having some sort of, oh, really? Okay, you're going to do this? Well, see you later. Cut off. They're going to work with, knowing fully well that's the end goal.
But
Well, there's no specific language in the agreement with respect to helping us transition into a new provider, but there is language in there that requires them. There's leeway in that agreement of 120 days, regardless of how we get out of it. That gives us the time to once we ultimately do that, which I don't think is going to be in the next 2 years. City Manager Breland. But there is some language in that agreement that gives us flexibility at the end of any contract term or in the middle of a contract term if a decision is made we needed to get out of it before the term is over.
But I
that
think
gives us some flexibility.
Based on past conversations, you would feel more, correct me if I'm wrong, you would feel more comfortable if council gave you direction to be working on a long-term plan, not just for transition, but to have our own fire and EMS or just EMS within the city.
My recommendation will come in the form of asking for that direction by way of a third party.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And that,
Should that
just
come-
I don't know if this is legal or not legal. I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. But if you're having to rely on your third-party contract provider to make sure you are transitioning into appropriate EMS provisions, I'm not sure that's the position you want to be in.
Yeah, but you want direction.
I don't think that's a legal
Yes,
comment.
clearly.
I get it.
Now, is that best? Come back at
Loud and
another
clear.
council meeting?
Sort
think
of
would be
contract
best to bring that back?
interpretation.
Is there a fox and a henhouse metaphor there?
But correct me if I'm wrong.
With a
in-
Band-Aid.
In conversations with Austin Travis EMS, they're willing to help us get to that goal. Is that right?
I will say that in conversations with who I believe is an authority, yes,
Okay. An authority at Austin Travis EMS.
chief.
Okay, yeah.
What's the renewal for the 2-year contract? What's the renewal process look like?
Charlie would be
Yeah,
great at answering.
looking for
Yeah,
that section, I'm sorry.
so it's I think, have we changed it to be 2 years yet, or is it still a year in the agreement?
It's-
But regardless, it's going to be 2 years. And at the end of that 2-year period, the party who intends not to renew must give the other party 90 days written notice.
There's a notification.
Yeah, and if that notice is not given within that time frame, then it's automatically renewed.
So
We would know.
there's a no action automatic renewal.
That's
And
what it is.
The renewal period is for 12 months?
12 months, yes. 12 months,
12
yes, sir.
months. I stand by my motion.
And of course, you're always free to agree. The two parties are always willing to get together and agree to renegotiate, extend,
Okay,
whatever.
any other discussion? I have a motion and a second on the table.
Thank you.
Mr. Ruiz?
Yes.
Ms. Holliday?
Yes.
Mr. Metayer?
I feel much more comfortable if it's a public entity as private, so I'm going to have to say no.
Okay. And Mr. McDonald?
I feel that going with the private entity affords us this path to a municipal entity, so yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Okay. And Mayor will side with Mr. Metayer. I don't know. Motion carry.